Yeah, welcome everyone to the next edition of PCQ Health Tech Talks. Now, we started this a few months back, and every month we get industry experts to tell you about the latest happening in the health tech scene. So this time the topic is, the what are the specific health tech solutions that helped India during the pandemic. Now, the reason for that is like we all know that the pandemic was a big crisis. We all suffered. But hats off to all the doctors, the nurses, the hospitals, diagnostic centers, IT providers, and startups who stood up. And actually, if you see that the last 2 years, more than the tragedies and the crises that have happened, is the solutions that have come up. We've had many heroes and we have had many solutions. So I think that at least in India, the WHO has declared the pandemic over and it has declared it endemic. So I think we can now look towards having a permanent, universal health tech care, having a permanent health tech system, and discussing the solutions that we can come out it. So the goal of universal healthcare can finally happen. So to join us on this important topic, we have with us Suthirth Vaidya, co-founder and CEO of Predible Health. Welcome to the show, Suthirth.
Hello, thank you, Sunil. Thank you for
Yeah,
having me here.
yeah. Then our second panelist is Sriram Natarajan, founder, director, and CEO, Molbio Diagnostics. Welcome, Mr. Natarajan.
Thank you. Hi, everybody.
Yeah. And we have Dr. Rashi Gupta, co-founder and chief data scientist of Rezo.ai. Welcome to the show, Dr. Rashi.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate me having you having me here. Thank you.
Yeah. So, I'll just get straight to it. As I mentioned in the intro, that I think all around me, I see are solutions. And the biggest thing when I talk to all the healthcare professionals is they are bursting with solutions. They say now it's been 2 years, we know what has gone wrong. Now these are the solutions. So probably we can start with one, whole holistic view. So if you look at the last 2 years, out of the many new health tech solutions that have emerged out of India, which one would you pick, and maybe you can describe why? Now I'm asking this doesn't have to be from your field or from your company, that we can discuss later, but you have seen the last 2 years. What do you think is the number one solutions which has really helped us? And I think we can go in any order, so let this be an informal discussion. So if anyone can start, or
Yeah, so if I can come in,
okay, Mr. Natarajan, sure, go ahead.
I think it's very difficult to pinpoint one solution because the COVID required a lot more holistic kind of an approach and a lot of interventions had to happen. But what has really happened is the Indian healthcare industry has transformed completely. Pre-COVID, India was importing almost 80% of medical devices. And now that's come down to almost about 55 to 60%. And the healthcare industry, the way it's going, probably the next couple of years, it might even come down to 20% import and 80% Indian. So that's the kind of change that has happened. So, like they say, every coin has two sides. COVID was devastating and had impacted a lot of lives. But COVID also opened up the healthcare infrastructure in India, both from the public sector and private sector point of view. The government played a fantastic role in aggregating activities, and the private sector, the innovators, and the entrepreneurs have also played absolutely amazing roles in their own ways. And what we see today happening in India was unprecedented. And this is something which is going to change healthcare infrastructure in India as we go along.
Thank you, Mr. Natarajan. I'd like to then pick that solution as Make in India. Since you talked of the import exos, so for you, the number one solution is Make in India.
Absolutely.
In health tech. Okay.
You're right.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe if we can move on.
Yeah, I'll just come in. I think one of the biggest other things that I think has really changed in the pandemic in the entire healthcare ecosystem in India is we talk about this in all industries, but for the first time, we are seeing digital transformation in the healthcare industry, right? I mean, we are seeing patients interact with doctors for consultations online. That in turn is leading to medical records being digitized. At least their prescriptions are being digitized. Prescriptions are now being delivered because the consultation itself was done digitally. So the app itself giving you seamless integration, give digital, but it doesn't just start at the incidence level, right? It's not just your consultation level. Even after your first consultation is over, there are now so many IoT devices, digital health devices that is constantly getting data and transmitting them to your doctors. Doctors now have real-time view of your glucose levels, of your ECG levels, of so many data points, respiratory rates, heart rates, and there are algorithms and doctors who are overseeing all of this. So it entirely the human being has now become sort of like a digital twin, exists in the digital world, where being accessible both to doctors, and I think that adoption has very significantly accelerated because of COVID, and because that there's going to be a lot of innovation that will now happen quicker, especially once related to data, because all of this now become part of the digital world. So I think that is I think one solution that accelerated because of COVID, and we'll see many fruits of that acceleration in the coming years, because we are now in a digital era for healthcare, thanks to that, because of COVID. So I think
Yeah.
that's
So
one
So I
interesting.
think then you can safely say we have entered the digital era, because
Yes.
I mean, something like telemedicine has been around for 15, 20 years, but patients didn't want to go. The government wasn't giving the permission. So I think telemedicine has taken off, and as you're right, that itself will boost electronic medical records and all the devices and all. So I'd say, yeah, that's also another way of looking at it. Indian healthcare has entered the digital era. So I'd like to hear your views, Dr. Rashi, then after that.
So Sunil, definitely, I think what we just heard from both the people here. I think it's bang on. I think we were not, it has its own positive and the negative impacts. But I think this time what has happened is, people have digitalization definitely came to the forefront, right? Also, the kind of products that have been done and developed and rolled out in the market at a very brief time is commendable amazingly, like how the Indian government have put together things to be able to roll in infra for for a country like India with so masses, people moving, and to be able to control it is amazing. And I think because I come from the digital space, like a digital transformation space, right? For us, I think pre-COVID, right, I'm talking about like a year and a half back, I think it was difficult for us to get appointments from large organizations, right? The moment COVID hit, right, it was amazing. A month I had back to back calls, people looking for those digital transformations to be able to roll out in the enterprise, because the enterprise came to a standstill. This was a situation unimagined, right? People were hoping that this is something which was there in your minds, but basically at the back end, right, in their back burners. COVID basically brought all of this to the front, right? People were forced to rethink what they wanted to do. They were doing things in a certain way, in a certain order, and this goes across the board. Our mindset, how we have been utilizing things. We were sitting at home, the way we were doing all of this thing. I think everything just, it was more like reshaped, right, and reshaped to a very fruitful new India, I would say, right, and a new world, I would say. So this is how the impact has been.
That's another thing I would never hear with the healthcare industry: digitalization. That I hear in all others. They're talking of hyper digitalization, but I never heard that term in reference to the healthcare industry. So I guess I mean, from listening to all three of you, I mean, that's what I also feel, that we have come on the right track, and hopefully, like, we can keep on this track. So this was like the larger picture, but as I said, that all of you have been doing great work. You have been coming out solutions. Maybe you can talk a bit about what specific health tech idea your company implemented with great effect. And I'm sure you have done a great job, and you'll tell us how it benefited a lot of people. But I would be curious to know, how do you think the rest of India can adopt it with ease? Because everybody is coming out with innovation, but the problem is that everyone has to do every innovation for all of us to go forward. So I would be curious to hear these two aspects about what you have been doing.
So I can start
Sure.
probably and say that Molbio Diagnostics, made a very innovative product about 7 years ago. And this one is called the TrueNat platform, which is taking real-time PCR to point of care. So what I mean by saying this is now everybody knows real-time PCR, but 2 years ago, nobody knew about real-time PCR or RT-PCR. And nobody, even in the professional circles, knew much about it because it was a very highly centralized kind of a technology, which only very, very few labs in the country could do, because of which it never became a routine clinical tool for diagnosing any kind of infectious disease. And Molbio was the first, probably globally the first, to really change this paradigm completely and bring this real-time PCR platform, which is now called RT-PCR platform, to a point-of-care solution, which means the test can be done practically at any location, anywhere, without any laboratory infrastructure. And this technology was built for multiple diseases. And the prime disease we were focusing at before COVID was on tuberculosis. So our TB test has been approved by SMR and also endorsed by WHO. And it's being rolled out by the National TB Eradication Control Program in a pretty large way. As that was happening, that's when COVID struck, and we could soon develop a COVID test on the same platform. And after that, the TB program said that, let us repurpose all our TB machines for doing COVID, because there was no COVID test available in those days. We were among the first companies to get an ICMR approval for COVID test on our platform. And just because the infrastructure was available, our machines were available all across the country, it was very easy for people all the private and public sector users to switch to using our COVID test on the platform. And so I would say that at least the first 5 to 6 months of COVID in the last, starting from April to say somewhere around October last year, we have played a very, very significant role as the major supplier of COVID test for the country. And we take pride in saying that because we believe we've been able to impact and save a lot of lives in the process. After that, of course, a lot of other companies have come with conventional PCR. And so now today, India is surplus in RT-PCR tests and it's in a position to export in a large way. But those days when COVID started, there was nothing available in India. And so I think we really played a big role there. And going forward, this platform is not only for COVID, also for all the other diseases, as I mentioned. So even though the infrastructure is being built for COVID testing now, but that can soon be transformed to doing multiple other tests, including TB and including hepatitis, including cervical cancer screening and so on. A lot of applications that can be done. This is truly an innovative platform. It's a global first, actually. And we call it as an Indian technology for the global markets, or, for global health solution. And already it's being recognized worldwide. And so that's what we have done. And I think that's made us a global company. But to answer your second question, I think the ecosystem, as you rightly said, is a little, dispersed. So different people are doing different things. Many times people are duplicating things. So I think there's a need for aggregating all those activities and a proper healthcare ecosystem to come up. And probably some good healthcare clusters and certain good policies of the government can motivate various efforts and activities to be pulled together so that there is a much faster development and a faster reach of good technology across the country. The National Digital Health Mission, for example, is a great step in this area. I think the idea is to aggregate digital health solutions into one platform, just like what you have UPI for as a payment gateway. I think NDHM is planning to have a digital architecture that can be the backbone for all other healthcare interventions in the digital space to take place. That's a great move. The government is also setting up a lot of clusters. One such cluster is in Vizag. It's called the AMTZ, Andhra Pradesh MedTech Zone. It's a very nice MedTech cluster. They call it probably the largest MedTech cluster in the world because of the size and the number of companies who are there. And they're doing a lot of stuff too. I mean, during COVID, that cluster completely focused on COVID. They started making oxygenators, ventilators, PPEs, and RT-PCR kits and so on. So it was amazing, the kind of energy that was there. And I really hope this energy continues. And I really hope that we are able to aggregate all these activities to focus on a larger picture.
Thank you. That's quite interesting because I think speed was the most important thing during COVID.
Yeah.
We had to do things fast. We had to know who was positive fast. And one thing I liked what you said, it's tuberculosis, hepatitis. That means it's bacteria and virus. That means it's
Yeah.
not just this real-time tests and all. I guess we can replicate it to all the diseases, especially in
Yes.
villages and all, because it is very critical to know in advance what is happening. And that is another thing we have seen. Before diagnostics, people would not take that seriously, but now diagnostics is the first line of defense whenever any
Absolutely.
pandemic happens, because unless you know what is happening, you cannot go forward. So
Right. You're right.
that's quite interesting. Thanks. So
So let
yeah,
me go.
Suthirth. Okay, yeah, Dr. Rashi, you go, please. Thanks.
So, as Natarajan sir was saying, I think, bang on, they've done like some wonderful products that they have built. To talk what Rezo was doing, and we're like quite in, we work quite in tandem with a lot of diagnostic, with a lot of hospitals to be able to bring the needful. And I'll talk a bit about what Rezo does. So, Rezo is primarily a AI powered contact center. So, imagine what activity happens in a typical contact center, which is all humanly driven. When COVID was happening, right, the contact center came to a standstill because people had not imagined call center agents not coming to work and trying to do the same remotely, right? So the infra was not, we were not ready for that infra. And we were at that point of time deployed with a large diagnostic labs, right? Everybody was running to get their COVID test done. There was so much of anxiety. Am I positive? Am I negative? What's the state for me? And as we as technology people, right, we as technology partners, we leverage a lot of machine learning, AI, NLP to be able to do the needful. What we brought on the table for this diagnostic lab, where humongous amount of COVID tests were being done, right, we seamlessly were sitting at the back end when people were not coming to offices, were not taking up the calls, right? We were there helping organize, helping the end customers set up appointment, which lab you can go to get your test done. The other thing that we were doing is, if the people were getting the COVID test done and their reports were getting uploaded, but the idea was, people usually, you will call a call center, hey, where is my report? Now in that scenario, people were not available, right? So what we did is, we at the back end were reading the emails, were reading the SMSs, were reading the voice messages, and trying to go to the backend server, fetching the right information for the end customer and doing it, then sending it out, the reports to them, without any human intervention. So that is what we brought on the table, right? We were working day in and day out, right, obviously, from our houses, but trying to do the needful for large diagnostic labs, setting up appointments for them to come and get the test done, giving them the right information as to how and what they need to do to be able to take care of the current situation. So those are the kind of things Rezo broadly brings on the table, and that is what we did, our part to get this going, and aided in basically easing out the end customers.
Yeah, that's also another thing which we don't think of, the back end, because when you think of the healthcare system, it is just the front end. But back end, I think now going forward, the back end is going to be more and more busy. More and more data is coming, more and more analytics, AI will be required, and especially when we have EMRs. Once everything goes on to EMR, I think back end will take a very, very crucial role. So that's also quite interesting. So I think then now Suthirth, maybe you can tell us.
Yeah. So just to give you introduction, at Predible Health, we build artificial intelligence on medical imaging. So our core competency is in building artificial intelligence-based solutions for radiology imaging. And if you notice what happened during COVID, there was a lot of dependence. Well, an RT-PCR test, like Sriram aptly mentioned, was the gold standard for testing whether a patient is COVID-19 positive or not. You often needed a CT scan to tell you how bad your COVID is. So, and your management is dependent on you getting a measure of how much of your lungs are actually affected with COVID-19. And early on, there were a lot of guidelines that came in on trying to establish, how bad should your lungs be so that you get admitted to the ICU, or can you take care of yourself at home, or do you need to be admitted in the ward? right? So there are different levels of care that patients need, and there are guidelines that came in early on, which at the time a lot of radiologists very quickly adapting to learn the guidelines and be able to implement them into practice, right? Specifically, I think what's now become a household term in terms of in the world of diagnostics is something called a CT severity score. A CT severity score is basically a score of how much your lungs have been affected with COVID-19. It's a 25-point score that tells you based on which doctor can take a decision whether can take care of yourself at home, you need to be admitted, whether you need ICU treatment. Right. What we did, and especially if you look at the context during the COVID time, all these diagnostic centers and hospitals, about 100% of their utilization of CT scanners were all just COVID scans. Right. Nobody else was coming into these hospitals. 100% of the workload was just COVID scans, and every single COVID scan required the doctor to generate the same report, which is to estimate what is the severity of COVID-19 in their lungs. So our software, we launched a software called Lung IQ. We were already working in the chest CT space. We detect cancer, COPD, interstitial lung diseases, multiple other diseases. So within as early as May, which is about 2 months since the pandemic hit in India, we were actually able to get enough scans and build our own models and launch a software which can look at COVID-19 scans. So we had entire hospitals, diagnostic labs uploading all the scans, upwards of 100 to 150 scans a day, all their scans coming to us, our software generating reports, automatically pre-filling these reports for the doctors, helping the doctors objectively calculate the actual burden of disease. And finally, the radiologist just had to review, sign off, and give out these reports to their patients. So in total, we were doing over 2 to 3,000 scans per day on a daily basis during the peak. Through the year, we did easily more than a lakh scans, which for COVID, which for our own numbers, these are very large number of scans that we were processing. So essentially, and this is also a big deal for us in terms of, again, I come back to digital transformation and we talk about ours is a completely cloud-based software. So all it took for anyone to install and start using our software was just that we needed remote access for an hour. We could get them up and running. It practically worked with all CT scanners and IT systems, and it will immediately start uploading all the scans. And we could just go log in from any browser. So and all radiologists were now not coming to the hospital, and we had a cloud-based solution which could also deliver AI-based results. So even though the software installed at the hospital, the radiologist could read the scans from while sitting at home and still send out reports to their patients without having to expose themselves to the hospitals themselves. So really digital transformation coming both in terms of cloud, in terms of AI, helping them improve productivity, reducing objectivity, and helping them essentially cater to the huge burden of scans that they were seeing on a daily basis. Right. So that's what our software does. And to your point, right? I mean, we probably touched a very small fraction of the number of hospitals and diagnostic labs across India. In fact, most of our deployments, if not all, they're all in tier 1 cities, right? Whereas a lot of the brunt of the disease and a lot of the value that our software could have been generated very well existed in tier 2, tier 3, and much smaller towns and cities. And so we are working with multiple distribution partners. We work directly with one of the largest radiology equipment manufacturers themselves to help provide a solution across to all CT scanners. And we hope that and further partnership with other radiology manufacturers will help us close the gap and try ensure that everyone gets a solution if a similar situation were to arise tomorrow.
Yeah, so I think that was another positive, cloud and collaboration. So cloud is ensuring that you can like treat from anywhere, you can get advice from anywhere, and I guess thank God like we have really jumped into the cloud. So I assume that we'll go forward. So I'd like to like maybe hear a bit more about your companies. Like say Dr. Rashi. I mean, it is very refreshing when say you look at what Zero.ai is doing. You're talking of things like RPAs, robotic process automation, bots, and the things like you're talking of data analytics, you're talking of customer experience, CX, you're talking of AI. Now, as I said, I don't hear all these terms. I never used to hear all these terms in the healthcare hospital industry. And even now, a lot of doctors and all are not, familiar about it. So I mentioned all these terms. If you can tell a brief about what these terms are in the healthcare industry, what you do, how it benefits, if it's not too long a question.
No, absolutely not. I think as more and more data is getting generated, right, it is becoming mandatory to be able to look through that, right? So there was a time, and obviously there are various fronts you're looking at. You're looking at RPA, you're looking at automation, you're looking at cognitive sciences, you're looking at machine learning, you're looking at NLP, and a lot of image processing, data processing, right? The idea is there are numerous use cases where, what we could do using the AI technology, the backend, the RPA. To name a few, it could be as simple as, scheduling an appointment with the right doctor, or doing the first level of screening, for example. That's the next level of conversational AI and automation, which is coming in the forefront. You basically train the doctors, because obviously, the kind of cases, the kind of situation that we were all in, right? If you have it's hard. I'm not saying that you'll be able to mimic the best, but the point is, if you get the information from the best of the people, right, it's hard for the best man to be able to address to thousands and thousands. But if you have, like, and there was so many scenarios, so many information given out, if you can cull all that information, right, and you create more like an avatar, like a fine avatar of the best, I would say the best, medical, practitioner in the world, right? If you do that, this person will be able to take up questions not in a sequential way. It would be able to do that in a more, more in a parallel way. A lot of people can do the calling, can talk about the symptoms, and the idea is you're not prescribing the medicine, right? You can obviously decide when to call it off, right? You can't be letting a bot do the prescription of the medicine, but yes, something which is routine, right? Something which is standard, right? Which the information you want to convey, all of that can be beautifully built in such bots, which we can, leverage as the, forefront person to be able to cater to broadly a lot of cases in this sort of a scenario, right? So this is the other use case that, we could think of. The other is humongous, right? The kind of data which is getting generated, what sort of, medicine is being prescribed under what situation. I did my PhD broadly in bio informatics, right? A lot of genomics data I was looking through when I was doing my PhD. So that time the next generation sequencing and microarrays were the, high throughput method that we were using to do the screening, right? So, I've seen that part of the world as well, and now I'm trying to leverage a lot of machine learning, AI, to be able to do, what is happening today as far as the RPA is concerned. So the cases are humongous, right? You name it, and you can very well adapt an RPA. The kind of work we did with the diagnostic labs, automating the back end, right? So that this information flow can happen to the end consumer who's in panic situation beautifully, like fast. Setting up appointment centers, right? Where and when is the right place for you to get your COVID test done, right? So those are the additional things that you could very well, take it up and actually do it. So analytically is very, very powerful, right? It's all about, I think initially we were just trying to set up the tech, and now, once the tech has been established, it's more about the more data that is getting generated, right? All of these devices which are measuring your glucose, you're measuring all the parameters of the human body, right? There's an interpretation, an automated alert, and automated interpretation. Currently, we are, with all of that data, we are building very basic mechanisms, which is also very insightful. I'm not denying that. But I think with the amount of data, if you start looking at not 4 5 variables, but if you put together a lot of information and also marry that with a lot of backend information of the personalized use case the person has gone through, what medicine, where, what's the current state, what could be the future prediction. So if you marry all of that and then do, simulations, you will be able to give these kind of prompts ahead of the time, that hey, this is your life pattern, this is your current, your current parameters looking like, future, this is where you are heading. If you don't pause, for example, smoking today, this is where you are heading, right? I mean, you have so much to, and these are more like reminders, right? These are gentle reminders. I'm not saying that when people have these sort of devices built in and looking at it more like a watch that we used to, to look through, right? I mean, you can use leveraged AI, you can leverage analytics in any way to be able to make life more simplified. And I think that is where the world is also moving towards. There is so much data, there is, high application to be able to build upon all of this, to be able to come up with remarkable products for to ease the overall pain that we are all in.
So I'd like to ask a follow-up question to that, because like probably the hospital industry and all was the last to jump on the cloud, and most of the hospital data has been offline, and also there are a lot of privacy issues, patient privacy issue, who owns the data, hospital. So most of it has been in silos out of that. So in the last 2 years, I just want to look from the point of view of medical data. Has the digitalization been happening? Has the data conversion happening? What is the quality of that conversion? What is the quality of data that is happening? Are you actually able to analyze it? Is AI effective? So if you just could briefly tell me what has been the data journey of the Indian healthcare system in the last 2 years, if that's possible.
Sure. So, Sunil, we primarily also working with a lot of insurance companies, right? Especially in the COVID times, trying to get like the insurance policy, also with hospitals as well as with the insurance giants. So, what we have seen is, I think they were at a very immature stage where they did. I mean, they were collecting the data but not leveraging the data to the best way. I think COVID has taught us that unless and until you start leverage, I mean, it was there in their mind to do it, but I think probably the extension was we'll do it in a couple of years. I think couple of leaders have taken the plunge, and just because when the leaders took a plunge, I think it was an eye opener for a lot of counterparts to be able to do exactly what they have been able to bring on the table. So we work with a lot of insurance companies, who, when we are looking at their data, right? Some of this is very basic, and I think personalized data that you mentioned, Sunil. For us to be able to make any interpretation, right? The kind of it all depends what sort of problem am I solving, but broadly, I do not need your PI information to be able to run a AI engine, right? It all depends what problem am I solving, but broadly, in a lot of cases that we are solving today, I don't care what's your mobile number, what's your name, what sort of disease you are having today. For me, it all matters the history, right? What drugs you have been on, what sort of insurance are you carrying today, where are you heading, what's your daily routine like, and we have the ability to marry all of this to be able to tell you as to, if you don't take xyz steps today, this is where you will go wrong tomorrow. So the analytics has that as an ability, right? It's all about the companies who are leveraging all of this AI technology. What sort of questions do they have in mind, and how do they want to leverage this data? What I've seen in the Indian scenario, they have data, they have not thought of what problems that they can address with it, right? And we have been working with a lot of these companies to actually say that, hey, give us a screen of what your data looks like. Let us look through. And what are the major pain points that you are facing, right? So we are helping a lot of our brands to look through their backend data to help them and understand this is what you can potentially answer. Is this a preview for you? Is this what you want to answer to your end customer, or this is the problem that you want to look at? So we are helping in a more consultative manner to look through the backend data that they are generating. Also, we are helping them, structure that data in a way that today you may not be able to, because you have not leveraged the data in that way. Today you may not be able to answer the questions that you want to address. But if you don't start collecting the data today in that format, you will never be able to address those questions. So we are working, and it's broadly people are at a very initial stages. A lot of companies, both hospitals as well as the diagnostic and the insurance, because this has never been their preview, right? They've not thought about it, right? So we are helping them, but they want to see the end result. So we are helping them bridge this whole gap. What data to capture, what are the questions that you will be able to answer basis these questions, basis the data point that we ask you to capture in the future. Help them capture this data to be able to get to the end result that they are looking at.
So I think that's also another interesting push is the insurance agencies, because they have a keen interest in having the correct data, enough data. Even they are pushing IoT devices and EMR. So I think, yeah, if everybody is pushing, so I think we are on the right track.
And I think if
So
you intermix all of this data, that is where the
yeah,
power will come in.
right. Yeah, I know that's the thing about data. You have to collect it, you have to analyze it, you have to collate it together, then only it will become powerful. Otherwise, it's just then also it becomes data sitting in your silo doing nothing. Okay. So I'd actually, Suthirth, I'd like to like certain concepts here. I'd like to carry forward with you. Like also about Predible health and lung IQ. In fact, many years back, one of the first interviews I did was a doctor, AI doctor talking of how they would take lung X-rays. When you take like 40, 50,000 X-rays, then the system can predict. So even it could be liver lesions, it could be anything. So if you tens of thousands of imaging scans, when you push, the AI can say it can give an initial diagnosis. So I'd like to discuss. So see, we are not talking of the AI replacing the doctor. Basically, it is making the doctor's job easier. When he sees a patient, he knows everything, he gets a prediction. So maybe from this angle you can talk about.
So yeah, I think AI in radiology has been a far evolving concept over the last, I think, almost 5 years. We've seen a lot of activity, both from startups, from industry players, and a lot of work even from research and from academic institutes in the space of AI for radiology. Right? I think of all machine learning approaches that you see today, imaging AI, imaging machine learning applied on imaging, or especially deep learning applied on imaging, is one of the most mature and most advanced science there is, right? So imaging AI really works, and we're seeing a lot of that in all the aspects around us, social media and things like that. Right? When we talk about medical images, I think 5 years back the understanding was, at least there are a lot of prophecies that people said that radiologists will get replaced by AI. But I think over now, I think reality has kicked in right now, and we everyone in the industry and everyone who's used and developed AI, we understand very well that these are tools that exist that can really augment the capabilities of radiologists today, right? If you look at the amount of time and the amount of detail that goes into a radiologist report today, it takes a good amount of time, anywhere between 15 to 20 minutes, and the workload of a radiologist is only going to keep going up, right? Because we are able to manufacture machines at a much faster pace than you'll ever be able to generate enough number of doctors, and the number of scans just continuously keeps going up, leaving lesser and lesser time for radiologists to read these scans, right? And the state of which AI is today is that AI is able to generate preliminary reports on a lot of conditions. But not just that, AI is actually able to do certain tasks at accuracies better than humans also, or let me put it this way: the same equivalent tasks, if they had to be done by a human, they would take much longer. They'll probably be able to get to the same levels of accuracy, but they take much longer, and AI is able to just do it in a much shorter period of time. A good example of this is our COVID quantification, right? If you had to quantify exactly at a volume level, it would probably take you 1 hour per scan, because you have to go through every single slice of your lungs, right? But when you talk about a CT scan, it's a 3D volume. So you would have to go through the entire 3D volume, mark out every single region of your lungs affected with COVID to finally get a quantification of how much of your lung is affected. But for an AI, this takes less than a minute. It just goes through the entire scan, and within a minute it gives you the exact number, right? So it's really making, for the first time, so what would otherwise have been a very subjective report, in the sense the radiologist is describing it as mild disease, moderate disease, severe disease, we are now able to get quantitative values, because AI is now helping them get precise numbers, right? Saying 32%, 40%, 45% of the lungs is what is affected with COVID-19, right? So that is, so the entire reporting, going from subjective reporting to becoming more quantitative, becoming more objective, I think that's a transition that we are seeing in reports, increasingly, fueled thanks to AI. Right. The second trend that you're seeing is a lot of minute, very subtle findings which you see in early stage diseases. Right. For instance, we work on something called lung cancer detection, right, on chest CT scans. These are minute, tiny, minute nodules as small as 3 millimeters to 5 millimeters. Often they are missed in such early stage disease. They're often picked up only in later stage disease. Right. And these are again conditions that a radiologist can pick up if he has enough time to spend on every scan. But the fact of the matter is they often do not have the same amount of time to spend on every scan, and our software in turn helps them detect these findings, ensure they don't miss these early findings on these scans, because again, AI is able to assist. right? In all these cases, what you would have seen is both of these cases, what you would have seen is the AI actively exists to acts as an assistant for the radiologist, because you're helping him pick up findings that he might have otherwise missed. You're helping him flag findings. We have another application where we detect brain bleeds from head CT scans. What you're primarily doing here is in if you have a stroke, time is brain. You say time is brain because the longer you wait for treatment, the higher chances of mortality and morbidity for the patient. So within the radiologist workflow, if we see a scan where we see a bleed, we'll flag it up and tell the radiologist, you have to read this now, you can't wait. Right, and that helps the patient get the report faster and the patient getting treatment faster, right? Which is literally actually, and we've seen multiple cases where doctors have given out reports in less than 10 minutes, and the patient's been straight wheeled into the operation theater, got their surgery immediately, which has significantly improved the chances of their of the side effects and long-term effects of a condition like stroke. And so we're seeing assistive tools where helping them improve sensitivity, helping them triage cases, give cases priority to cases that are emergency in nature. And seeing the entire reporting paradigm change from subjective free text to quantitative reports, which are more structured in nature, because AI is now helping you plug in multiple parts of your report, right? Thereby standardizing and quantifying your entire report. So all in all, I think we are seeing a paradigm shift in the radiology reporting workflow itself. AI has come in, and it's come in to a fairly good extent. We're seeing that seeing that adoption in various levels across different hospitals, not just abroad, but even in India. And we think it will basically benefit radiologists be able to deliver and read many more scans at many more scans at a much faster pace than what they're used to, right? So it's like a it's an aid, it's an assistant, and at the end of the day, these softwares have a long way to go before they can be anywhere close to replacing a radiologist. Even for very routine, mundane stuff, you still need someone to ensure and give you that comfort that there's nothing been missed and everything's reported accurately.
Yeah. So actually, Suthirth, one more question. Oh, sorry, Mr. Natarajan, if you'd like to add, you can add.
Yeah, if I can come in, I just wanted to add to what you
Sure.
were saying.
Please.
In fact, AI for chest X-rays, especially for diagnosing tuberculosis, has become a routine diagnostic tool. It's actually endorsed by WHO. There are Indian companies who are doing this. A company called Cure.ai from Bombay, and a company called Deep Tech from Pune. And these are already in vogue, already being used and endorsed for routine screening of TB patients. They're all diagnostic tools, but they still have to be confirmed. The positive cases coming from a chest X-ray still needs to be confirmed. And in fact, that has started a new kind of activity, what's called as an end-to-end screening for tuberculosis. When you want to go for doing active case finding, you go to hotspot areas where you have to screen a large number of people. It's practically not possible to do a real-time PCR on all these people. So the recommended method is that you do a chest X-ray first and do an AI-based reading of the chest X-ray. So the moment you do the digital X-ray and in a couple of minutes you get a report, it tells you positive or negative, you can actually fine-tune the sensitivity to be the highest at the cost of probably some specificity, so that every positive can be confirmed by a PCR. All this can happen in a van. So the van has an X-ray machine, has a small lab which has a PCR, our portable PCR machine, for example, TrueNAT, and the van can go to these hotspot areas. It could be like mining areas, or it could be areas with very high incidence of TB, and just screen the population, get them and keep on doing chest X-rays. You can do a lot of X-rays in a day. Depending on the digital X-ray machine, 400 to 500 X-rays can be done. And even if we expect about 20% positivity, those can be confirmed by a PCR. And you can start treatment straight away. So this is already there. It's already being used as a routine tool, recognized, and it's only being applied more and more. So this is something which I want to add, that it's already becoming not only an assistive tool, but actually already a diagnostic tool.
Yeah.
Similarly, I've seen a company who are already starting to read MRIs and starting to give quantitative data, which can give very clear information about neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, dementia, epilepsy, and so on. And so this company is again now almost getting a US FDA approval, I think, in the last stages. And they're already in the clinical side, and a lot of interpretation of MRIs is now happening using that tool. So we are now going out of the assistive tool to actually diagnostic tools themselves, where they can give you much more value. And coming back to the chest X-ray, many studies have been done, and it's been shown that AI-based solutions are even more accurate than a radiologist, and it's published in Lancet actually. So that's where we are going, and these tools are only going to get better and better. And not only radiology, I'm seeing this happening in other, like what we call as AI-based pathology solutions. Where you do hematology, you can scan slides and interpret cancer. You can interpret a lot of hematological parameters. Even you can do a CBC count, so total blood count on a slide using AI-based tools. This field is just endless. It's growing, and in many situations already playing a role. And as we go along, I'm 100% sure this is probably going to be the way diagnostics is going to be in future. It could pretty change.
Yeah, so I'll
Yes.
Suthit, I'll just like to add to what Mr. Natarajan is saying. So what I was thinking is, if you look at like the WHO statistics, you'll find like among the biggest killer, whatever heart attack this, but you'll find lung cancer, lung ailments, asthma, even COVID. Actually, lung ailments, if you combine all of them, it could be the biggest killer. So how do you think we can cater to rural India? Because again, Mr. Natarajan talked about diagnostics, mobile vans, and all, and you have also talked of the X-ray being analyzed by an AI fast. So can we like cater to AI, and TB continues to be a big killer in India? So what are
Yeah.
your views on that?
Yeah, I think certainly. See, I think the what Sriram illustrated sometime back, I think is a very good example of AI being used in a very narrow use case, right? You're looking for just one condition. So for all you know, that X-ray could have had something else, but you are just asking the AI to pick up tuberculosis, tell if it's there or yes or no. So those are the kinds of narrow use cases that AI is best suited for, and you can conduct like large scale screening camps. And the challenge today, if you want to be able to do a much larger screening of multiple conditions or multiple lung diseases, where you want to look not just tuberculosis, but look beyond tuberculosis to say, lung cancer, COPD, many of the large killers. These are some of the large killers exist. The problem is not just the shortage of doctors being able to read it, but who's going to fund the equipment, who's going to fund the patients, the scans of the patients, and sort of plan and organize the logistics around it. It's often not just the throughput on the reading side of it, but also the throughput of the machine itself and how many scans it's able to take. Right, some of these programs for tuberculosis have a fairly good backing from the government of India, from the government India itself, and other and very strong NGOs who sort of specialized in the operationalization of these campaigns to ensure that large scale screening programs can happen. The issue behind I think AI, we ourselves have solutions which can help detect other lung ailments as well, such as COPD and lung cancer. But the question is, how do we arrange and mobilize large scale screening programs for larger parts of the population, so that if you're an affluent person in living in Bangalore, you want to walk to a Manipal and get yourself tested, I think that's very much possible today.
So, Mr. Natarajan, then I'll just conclude this round with you. What other changes have been taken? You have talked a lot of what has changed in the diagnostics scene. What else has changed? And also, now people are having IoT devices. They're having wearables, home testing kits. So, are you in competition with them, or do they help you? So maybe if you can just finish on that, on what changes in the diagnostics are there, and where do wearables, home testing kits fit into all of this?
See that different aspects we're talking about. Diagnostics, we are speaking about classical diagnostics where laboratories are there and they play a role. They take your samples, do a test, give you a report. That area itself is changing. That area itself is getting digitalized. That area is itself getting, like automated and connected. So this connection becomes a very important thing, because ultimately when things go to cloud, a lot more things can be done. So before coming to the other part, I will also say that, for example, our own machines are all connected. So we have also telemedicine built into our systems. And our machines are placed all across the country, the most rural locations. and where practically there are no infrastructure at all, and people are still doing a PCR, for example. And these machines can talk, and they can talk to any other device. They can talk to a central server. And in the case of TB, we connect to the national portal called Nishchay. So at any given point of time, and these are all real-time information flowing into the server. At any point of time, a person sitting in the TB control program can see exactly what's happening around the country. How many TB tests were done that day? How many came positive? How many came negative? How many were men? How many were women? What was the age stratification? What are the hotspots? So you can even highlight the hotspot areas. So it gives so much of information that it's not just a question of treating the patient. It's just also about disease management itself. And so these are very powerful tools. And that's already changing the way programs are being implemented, the way testing is being done by laboratories, the way interpretation is being done. So that's the professional side. The second side is what we call the wellness. So that is something which is gaining a lot of traction again. So people want to have control of their own health. They also want to keep monitoring their own health, not necessarily having to seek healthcare through a physician or a laboratory, but being under control themselves. And that's where these wearables and other devices which can help people do testing at home and still be connected, so that if anything goes untoward, a physician is automatically alerted or a healthcare provider is already alerted. And so those kind of things are also happening at the same time. And going forward, this all will merge. So the wellness and the illness all will get sort of merged, and they'll all get sort of combined into this digital platforms that can do multiple things for everybody, right? So that is the idea. That's how things are growing. And we're going to see a lot of changes. In the next couple of years itself, I can tell you, the way we seek healthcare is already changing and will change dramatically. And what methods we adopt today are all going to change. That I can see very clearly. And digitalization, digital platforms, connectivity is going to be the key. And as you said, health records, electronic health records, and digitalization is going to be the key. That's absolutely very clear in all aspects of healthcare, not only diagnostics.
So I like that we're changing and we'll keep changing. So that is the way forward. So it's been great listening to your ideas and solutions, and it's very positive. So I think like before we go, I'd like to hear a last word for maybe you can just sum it up in 2 to 3 minutes in the sense that, much more needs to be done. Where are we still lacking? What new healthcare technology should be implemented by either the government or industry, and how should India go about it? What would your advice be? So, should I, Mr. Natarajan, you want to go?
Okay, sure. So as I said, things are already being set in motion. So the National Digital Health Mission itself is, I think, a very big step. And I think a lot of push is happening there. And soon we'll have an architecture available that will, first of all, take into account the privacy issues. And also it will take into account, integrating all the solutions through a common kind of a backbone, so that there is some kind of uniformity in the approach, and there's some kind of a continuity in the approach. And so those kind of things are happening. And I only wish that we are also able to have connectivity solutions also going in parallel, because today there are a lot of places we still have issues in connectivity. So if those are not completed, then a digital solution will not really be universal. So to make it universal, these connectivity issues have to work in parallel. Probably work with healthcare companies also, and probably with the digital mission and so on, and try to see that a proper infrastructure gets created, so that will be conducive for all this integration to happen. So that's where expectations are that things will improve. And we think that the government is very serious about what they're saying. And if that happens, then probably it will change our entire infrastructure, healthcare infrastructure, and the healthcare access to everybody on an equitable basis, as what the government says, universal access to healthcare. It can happen only when all these things are done.
Yeah, so here's looking towards 100% connectivity and access.
Yes.
So would okay,
Go
so
next. I think I think one of the things that I really like to see is I think we are increasingly seeing improved accessibility across, not just high quality care being accessible in tier one cities. We are increasingly seeing tier two cities, tier three cities improve their quality of care. I think fundamentally we've not had very deep healthcare insurance penetration, because of which there have fundamentally not been great incentive for players to set up strong medical facilities in the smaller towns and cities. I think with Ayushman Bharat coming and increasing coverage and increasing insurance coverage that pans out, I think there's going to be a lot more incentive, and a lot more incentive as the ecosystem itself will start rewarding. Right? And once we start seeing more and more facilities and advanced facilities come in, I think that's where really all the digital and connected ecosystems will really start playing a role in ensuring that you can get good quality care, not just in the Bangalore and the Delhis of India, but even in the smaller towns and cities. So I think it's a mix of insurance penetration plus connectivity and digital solutions. I think is what I'm looking forward to help ensure that everyone in India, not just the affluent, are able to get good quality care.
Yeah, until we reach the villages and towns, I don't think we can claim any kind of success. So, Dr. Rashi, the last word is with you for this discussion.
No, I think the government is already doing a lot of push, right? And the mindset is changing broadly, right? But obviously, it's large country, things don't happen like it's hard, right? So I would say the onus lies in the hand of individuals, right? To basically, if people know of solutions or people have ideas, I think the government is anyways calling for a lot of these ideas, right? How can you bring that out? But I think it's a very conscious call that we all will have to put together to be able to do the needful. It's a very I think I can always set my expectation. I need this, I need that, but the idea is you need task force who are aligned to the overall agenda that we have, and how do you make that happen? I think in small bits and silos things are happening. I think this wave, actually what we saw concretely was amazing, right? The way the whole country has pulled it out, and I think the kind of advancement that has happened is amazing. But yeah, I think the momentum needs to be continued. We need some thought leaders to be able to bring about those pivots, right? Somebody needs to just carve that out. But yeah, I mean, we're just looking at to be able to carve that out so that the momentum doesn't get lost.
Yeah. So even I agree, because as I said, industry, government, everyone is doing, and I think after COVID, every citizen in the world has become a medical expert. So it's time to walk the talk instead of just speaking. So I think that's a very good note to end on, that the individual, and as I said, the more I talk to healthcare professionals like you, the more hopeful I am that we are going to finally get universal healthcare. So I'd like to thank you for this engaging and engrossing discussion where so many solutions came out. And I would love to maybe meet after 6 months, 1 year, to see what more has happened one of these days. So, okay. So thanks everyone. Thanks everyone for listening. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.